Kia ora and welcome to Swim Chats, a podcast about swimming. I'm Shona Riddell, a writer, former journalist and swimmer from Wellington, Aotearoa, New Zealand. For each episode, I talk to a different guest from our swim community. Please hit the follow button so you don't miss an episode. If you enjoy the podcast, please share it with a friend or two. You can also leave a 5-star rating, which helps other people discover Swim Chats. And finally, to support the podcast and help me to continue running it, you can become a swim buddy on Patreon for $5 a month. To find out more, visit patreon.com/swimchats. There's a link in the episode show notes. And this month, we welcome new swim buddies, James and Toy. First of all, Dennis, welcome to the Swim Chats podcast. Thank you for your time today. Now we're more seriously in spring and the water's warming up in the sea, and we're starting to get the little jellyfish making an appearance. I thought it might be a good time to talk to somebody who knows more about them to sort of explain what we're seeing and also how to navigate safely around them. Some are more harmless than others, I know. But I thought we'd start with the basics. What exactly is the definition of a jellyfish?
Yeah, that's a challenging one because jellyfishes, or jellies as some people prefer to call them, cover not just the stingers, but also completely different kinds of organisms that are also jelly-like. So you have little spherical blobs about a centimeter in diameter and other related ones called comb jellies. And they're a completely different animal phylum. And then at the other end of the animal kingdom, in the phylum Chordata, you've got salps. And salps are very distantly related to us, but they're related to sea squirts, which probably people who walk seashores have seen sea squirts. But they're very jelly-like, and they live in the plankton, and they're completely unrelated to stingers, and they don't sting. So really, the jellyfishes are the ones that people think of as conventional jellyfish. They've got a kind of a dome-shaped bell, and underneath they've got oral arms, which they use for feeding, and around the perimeter they've got tentacles. So those are the true jellies, really.
Oh, and they're not fish, are they? So why do we call them jellyfish?
Yeah, that goes back centuries.
Is that one person's mistake and it's just coming through? I'm glad you mentioned salps because we see a lot of those over the summer. They're almost like little jelly beans.
Yeah, some of them are. Yeah, some of them can get quite large, almost as large as a hand. So they're very impressive things.
And so jellyfish are mostly made of water, aren't they? And they don't
Pretty much, yeah. The bulk of that is water and protein, really, and mineral salts. Yeah, so jellies are related to corals and sea anemones. And so they're stingers because they've all got stinging cells in their tentacles. But not all species have a felt sting. So if you've ever been to a seashore and seen sea anemones in a rock pool, the temptation is to put your finger in there. And you might feel a gentle tug as you try and pull your finger out. And the reason for that is that all the stinging cells have sort of harpooned your skin cells, but you're not feeling any sting. It just doesn't sort of have that impact. But for a little wee creature, that's enough to be food.
For them, that's enough. And so if they don't have hearts and they don't have brains, but they have stingers, are they sort of sentient beings? Are they controlling where they move, or are they more just drifting through the currents and stinging?
Those are really great questions. So they are in the animal kingdom because they've got nerves and they've got muscles and they've got gametes like we do, sperm and eggs and all that sort of thing. So, but they're very lowly. They don't have a backbone. They're not vertebrate creatures. They're just think of a sea anemone. That's just sort of the basic design. It's just like a bag, one entrance in and out. And so they'll swallow something, and if there's anything that needs regurgitating, out it goes. And so a very, very basic design. There's no brain, just a nerve net. And but that's enough to coordinate their activities. And the actual stinging cells kind of have a hair trigger, if you like, and that's what causes the cells to discharge.
And so when they're stinging prey, they're doing that to catch them, obviously. But when they sting humans, you may not be able to answer this. Are they stinging us on purpose? Is it a defense mechanism, or is it more accidental and we just happen to be swimming past?
I think it's just a tactile thing. I've seen photographs, really amazing, of a very large anemone. I think this was in North America, which had the head of a bird, a shag, stuck in the gut cavity of this large anemone. And I think it's just a matter of anything that sort of comes near the oral tentacles around the mouth area, and if you touch it and they feel it, well, they're going to grab it. So they don't have a lot of discrimination.
Yeah, fair enough. I've I've noticed that they have a sort of pulsing movement underwater. Is that to sort of move themselves? Like, why do they make that sort of pulsing movement?
Yes, the jellyfishes and the plankton do have that pulsing movement, and that does help to move them around. So some of them have weak photoreceptors. In other words, they can detect light and dark. And so if they want to migrate to the surface where there might be some more plankton or something like that, which maybe they detect in a chemical sense, then yes, they can swim unidirectionally. At the same time, they're in currents and they can be moved passively with currents and also winds as well. So that's why they get swept up on shore. But they're not completely, y- clueless is the wrong word, but they're not completely at the mercy of everything. They can, as I say, they can do directional movement.
A lot of them end up washed along the beach, and many of them can still sting even after that point. Is that because they're still alive, or because their stingers somehow still operate? Like,
Yeah, that's exactly right. Parts of the tissue are still alive, including the stinging cells.
well, okay. And how
Yeah.
long does that last?
Oh, that's a really good question too. I would think not more than 24 to 48 hours. So if they're stuck in such a way that they're not going further up the beach or back into the sea, but if the waves are washing over them, that's going to slow down the rotting of the tissues or the decay of the tissues. So I think that's the time frame. But interestingly, if you see a jellyfish on the beach and mostly what you're seeing is the bell, which is all jelly. You can touch the top of the bell and you won't get stung. It's just the tentacles underneath. Or if it's been flipped over and you touch the underside, yeah, you're gonna get stung. Um, but there's really only two major true jellyfishes, I have to put it that way. So you talk about the lion's mane, and they can get to up to about 30 centimeters across. And in the open ocean, even larger. There's quite a few species in the world. Our one is found also in Australia called Cyanea rosea because it's got this sort of pinkish purple rose color. And it's a different species from the common one in Europe, for example. And related to that, in the same family, is the spotted jelly. So it looks like it's got black polka dots on the top. In the fjords, there's a variety that lacks those spots, but the spotty one too can also sting. So those are the two main stinging jellyfish. But also, you've got other distant related forms, which are not true jellyfish. They're a kind of a colonial. True jellyfishes are individuals, but in the sea you've got the Portuguese Man of War, and that's a stinger too. He washes up on west coast beaches, and that's recognizable because it's got this float, like a little balloon, sort of bluey, transparent balloon, and the tentacles of that can trail out to 30 meters in the open ocean, and that's a real bad stinger as well, which can sting for some time after it's been washed up on the beach.
Is that the same as the blue bottle?
Yes, yes, and we've just been discovered. There was a paper came out earlier this year. We actually have two species of blue bottles in New Zealand. One of them just recently described.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, they tend to be around the south coast of Wellington, where I see.
yes, yeah, that's true. But they're all around New Zealand.
Hmm. And when I'm swimming in Wellington Harbour, the two I tend to see the most are the moon jellyfish by far,
Yes,
the sort of translucent ones, and they're harmless to humans, I think.
pretty much. Yeah, yeah. I've never felt a sting. It's conceivable that a very young child with thin skin, or maybe in the armpits or groin or something or other like that, might conceivably feel it, but an adult won't normally feel a moon jelly sting. But nevertheless, it's probably a good idea not to touch them quite a bit, because even though you might not feel the sting, you might nevertheless, there might be a sort of a response, a bodily response to that at a kind of subliminal level.
I've
But yeah,
swapped through.
the moon jellies are great. They're you put in an aquarium, they look fantastic. Sort of transparent, diaphanous, pulsing around, just look quite beautiful, really. You know
Yeah,
your jellies. You know your jellies.
I know some of them. Yeah, I've heard those ones described as ghost-like, which I quite like.
Yeah.
And you do get to know them because I've swum through dozens of them,
Oh wow.
and they're a lot sort of firmer than you expect. You think of jelly, you think of it being wobbly, but their bodies, or bells as you called them, are quite firm. So it's
Yes.
almost like swimming through a sort of lumpy, lumpy.
Yeah. Have you detected any stings from swimming through them?
No, no, I haven't.
Right,
I
right.
do, I do tend to swim in a wetsuit, but so that
That
might.
helps. Yeah.
I was going to ask you if sea lice are the same thing as baby jellies, because people do notice getting hurt by those, and they tend to go down people's togs because they're so small.
Well, yeah. Well, see, sea lice, they're generally, well, true sea lice are generally isopod crustaceans, um, and they're not jellies at all. They're completely different, like sea slaters in a sense. But there is another thing which is often crops up in the Hauraki Gulf called the long, stringy, stingy thingy. What divers call it.
Yeah.
And that is related to the Portuguese Man of War. So it's a siphonophore. And I know that's a big word, but I was really amazed one day when my grandson, he was only about 6, and he says, "Grandpa, do you know what a siphonophore is?" And I thought, I know what a siphonophore is. How come you know what a siphonophore is? But he was watching Octonauts, this kids program.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and so even kids can handle these big terms. So a siphonophore is a colonial type of hydroid. It is in the same phylum as jellyfish, as the phylum Cnidaria, Cnidaria, phylum of stingers. And yeah, so the long stringy stingy thingy is a siphonophore, which has a very, very long colony with these tiny little spherical transparent beads along the string. And they can break off, get trapped between your bathers and your skin, and that's what people think of as sea lice.
Right. Okay, that's good to know. And the other one you mentioned was the lion's mane. I have seen those. I haven't been stung by them, but friends of mine definitely have.
Yes.
Because they're easy to spot. They're sort of a bright pinky orange color, but they have very long tentacles. So even if you don't feel like you're touching them, they can be stinging you at the same time.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
those won't hurt. But those ones tend to be more solitary, I've noticed. Like the moon jellies tend to sort of group together, and the lion's mane are more separate. Is that?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, okay. Is there anything we can do apart from wearing a wetsuit? But is there anything that prevents jellyfish stings? Like, are there any smells they don't like, or is there any sort of deterrent?
In the sea, none that I can think of. So as you say, wetsuits, anything that prevents contact with the skin is the way to go. I don't know if there are some barrier creams that one could put on your skin. I haven't
Mm.
heard of that.
And they because they come in the warmer months, does that mean they prefer warm water, or are they found further south as well?
It's probably a consequence of the life cycle. So when it gets to this time of the year, and um, you got more sunshine hours, and that causes a growth of plant plankton, which then feeds up through the food chain to the animal plankton, small fishes and crustaceans, the food that jellyfishes eat. So there's more food available for them. They're going to be growing more at this time of the year, and from now on through the summer. But I've seen them washed up on Wellington harbour beaches even in the middle of winter. Fewer than in the summer, but they seem to be all year round, actually.
Hmm. And are they becoming more abundant with warming ocean temperatures?
I haven't heard of anything to that effect because even though you're going to get warmer temperatures, it is going to depend very much on life cycling and seasonal plankton, which will continue for the foreseeable future.
And would you find jellyfish in Antarctica, for example, or would that
Oh,
be?
yes, there are. There's jellyfishes are found all around the world and at all depths in the oceans. Yeah, there are
Oh,
some that are found only in midwater and found only in deep water. So in the abyssoplankton, for example.
wow. They'd be interesting looking ones, I'm sure.
Oh, they are, and some of them are brilliant, sort of burgundy colored, magenta, deep red, really deep in the sea. Only people who go down in submersibles see these ones.
Yeah. Have you been in a submersible?
I haven't, no.
No, neither have I. I like being on the sea surface. Because I'm a writer as well, that's one of my other jobs. I'm quite interested in the language around jellyfish. I like how the adults are called medusas. Um,
Yes,
like the mythical creature with the snakes.
that's right. Yeah, gorgeous.
Yeah. And you mentioned that the body's called bell because of the shape of the body. And I also wanted to ask you about the collective noun for jellyfish because I've heard a bloom of jellyfish, a swarm, and a smack of jellyfish. Are they all correct, or is one more correct than another?
All of those are correct. I've not actually personally heard the term smack, but it sounds Australian to me. Maybe I don't know.
Not sure where I heard that one. Which one
Yeah.
do you use?
Swarm is good.
Hmm.
Yeah. Of course, the other phase of the life cycle of a jelly is the polyp stage. So the the bell is the reproductive stage of the life cycle, and so that has the gonads, the sperms, and the eggs. And when you get a zygote formed from a fertilization event, that then multiplies into a bundle of cells with cilia on the outside, and that's called a planular larva. And then at some point, that settles on the sea floor and develops into a stage that looks very much like a white sea anemone. And they're not often seen, but I've seen photographs that divers have sent in. Um, there's there's a lot of photographs I've seen from Marsden Marina near Whangarei, and on rock walls around certain coastlines. And so they look like small white jellyfishes, but with unusually long tentacles in proportion to the sac-like part of the body. So that's one way in which you can distinguish them. But for most people, seeing the polyp stage of a jellyfish, they wouldn't know that that was actually a jellyfish.
Right.
So, and then what happens? That anemone type thing starts budding another set of tentacles at its entrance and continues to do that um, to form a stack. And then each of these flat stacks, which is kind of like a planar sort of jelly thing, is just they're budding up a whole series of them. So that's called a scyphistoma stage of the life cycle, and it produces maybe up to a dozen of these little babies from the one polyp, and they float off into the sea and develop into the adult.
Do we know how many jellyfish species there are around the world?
Surprisingly, given how common jellyfish species are, it's a group of organisms that is of low diversity, at least so far as we can tell. But molecular sequencing has determined that a lot of moon jellies, for example, are actually not all the same species. So in the last few years, there's been a plethora of moon jelly species described. So to the eye, they're going to look pretty identical. And only an expert could really tell them apart visually. And even then, it's hard. And so, unfortunately, it looks like molecular sequencing is going to be the way to determine with any country's waters what species they have. But once you've documented what ones you have for your own country, it's unlikely you're going to get other species coming in. In other words, around the world, they do seem restricted to particular bodies of water or seas.
Right. That's interesting. I'd sort of imagine them just floating, floating
Yeah.
to sea.
Yeah,
Right.
no, there are boundaries in the ocean, which is good.
Yeah. So do we know, Do we know how far they can travel? Like, what are the boundaries?
Well, different water masses. So there are depth boundaries. So you can't. So planktonic species can't penetrate beyond a particular depth, because there are certain layers in the sea. But then also there's a juxtaposition of cold and warm currents, and so they'll tend to be within a particular ocean current.
We should talk about treatment for jellyfish stings. That will be a question on everybody's mind.
Yeah,
I know the idea of peeing on somebody's sting has been debunked, and I think most people listening to this
I'm
podcast
rather pleased
don't
that it
do. Yeah,
is.
just for the record, yeah, urine is not a good treatment for stings. So, what is a good treatment if somebody's been stung?
The very best thing to do is to flush the reason why it's very tempting, like if you're at a beach and you get stung, to sort of want to go to a tap and wash it off. But unfortunately, fresh water will, because of osmotic pressure differences between fresh water and the cell contents, will trigger more stings if the stinger cells are still stuck to your flesh.
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah, so the best thing to do is flush vigorously the stung area with seawater, and maybe just throw a bucket at it. Or if you got a plastic empty Coke bottle, for example, you can fill that with seawater and then squeeze it to provide some pressure. But vigorous washing is probably a good way to do that. And then afterwards, if it's still stinging, just maybe go to a chemist and get some antihistamines, something like that, and cream and rub on it.
So, if we're already swimming in the sea, we're in the right place for treatment. Does that mean because we've already got salt water around us, or is it better to get out of the water and flush the sting with salt water?
Well, yes, just get away from the jellyfish, and then yeah, flush it. Just splash, anything that will maybe remove those stings.
Okay, that's good to know. And I know that some jellyfish stings can be fatal. Is that for people who have 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 an allergic reaction to that particular type of jellyfish?
Well, some people who are highly susceptible can get anaphylactic shock. But some jellies, especially the box jellies in Australia and tropical waters, can be utterly deadly. I think one of them is the deadliest creature on the planet, the irukandji and its close relatives. And yeah, so box jellies, if you're swimming off Queensland or Northern Territory, or even further north than that, um, give them a wide berth. And usually, some of those beaches will have netting around them to keep the box jellies separate from bathers. They're bad news.
Do box jellies ever come here, or is it too far?
We have one native species of box jelly that has a very, very wide distribution, even up into the tropics. It's only about the size of the tip of your thumb. Um, it's species that used to be called Caribdea sylvicosa. Now it's Copula sylvicosa. It's turned out that it's a very advanced form of jelly. All box jellies have four um, well-developed photoreceptors, almost like eyes, but of course there's no brain to process the information. So it's quite an unusual development. But they're more advanced bodily, and also this copula, this tiny little species, actually copulates, which is quite extraordinary for a jellyfish.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so
So,
that one is it's been mostly seen off the Wellington south coast, sometimes in rock pools, and usually at night. It's a very cryptic thing. I've never seen it myself, but quite pretty. People Google copula, um, they'll find a picture of that. It's quite a pretty little thing.
I'll link to it in the show notes.
Yeah. So
Does
NIWA produces a jellyfish guide called Jiggling Jellies, which is freely available online as a PDF. If anybody wants to get that, so just Google Jiggling Jellies and it's yours.
Oh, I'll link to that as well. I saw it when I was doing my jellyfish homework. It's got some great big color photos, making it really easy to identify.
Yeah, so they're not all in there yet. I think a second edition is about to be produced, or maybe just has. And we're trying to add new species to it each year
Hmm.
to slowly build it up. But in New Zealand, you're asking about species numbers. We have, well, jellyfish is used to, like, in the phylum Nidaria, there used to be just one class of jellyfish called Scyphozoa, and that included not only what we now call true jellyfishes, but also the box jellies and another group called stalked jellies. So there is such a thing as a stalked jellyfish, which is permanently attached on the stalk. And yet they're more related to jellyfishes than, say, corals or hydroids, for example. So we have 18 species of true jellyfishes in New Zealand, Scyphozoa. We have that one species of cubozoan or box jelly, copula, and we've got 7 species of stalked jellies. So not a lot. Globally, there's probably not more than about 500 species of true jellies. And so it's a very small group, actually. But as I say, molecular sequencing is expanding that number.
I was reading that jellyfish have existed for something like 500 million years, been around a very long time. This might be a silly question, but how do we know that? Because it's not like they're leaving behind fossilized skeletons that are discovered. So, how do we know that they've been around that long?
Yeah, so the earliest impressions have to be preserved in very, very fine, muddy, silty sediment. And so um, if that compacts quickly on a dead jelly, and if you've got anoxic conditions where there's no oxygen and which slows down the rotting process, and then over time that compacts, then the impression, and that's all it is, the impression of the shape of that jelly and the radii um, of the body, that can be preserved. And so those sorts of imprints that you find in the early Cambrian and Precambrian are the best evidence for jellies of that period.
Wow. And do they seem to have evolved much in that time, or are they more or less the same as they were?
The basic body plan remains unchanged. Basically, um, well, it's for Nidaria, just a sort of a sack-like body. And in the case of jellyfish, it's flipped upside down because the mouth is on the bottom and it's hanging in the ocean. But that basic design, yeah, it's pretty much unchanged. But as I say, with the cubozoans, the box jellies, obviously over the eras of geological history, physiologically they've developed and diversified.
So jellyfish seem to be quite abundant in our waters at certain times of the year. Are there any endangered species or vulnerable species?
Yeah, that's again great questions. There, now there was a guy called Haeckel. It's Haeckel, a German, who, back in the 1800s, published a very remarkable book, the English title of which was Art Forms in Nature, and he illustrated quite a number of species, including a couple from New Zealand that have never been seen since. So our 18 true jellies may be fewer than what we have on the list.
Right. Interesting. And if you've got time, I'd be interested to hear about your career and how you became a marine scientist and learned so much about jellyfish.
Well, here's the thing. We have no jellyfish experts in New Zealand, and I'm certainly not one. In fact, there used to be one global authority in Australia, but she's now no longer in science. So you could probably count on the fingers of one hand people on the planet who I would say are really jellyfish experts. In other words, that's what they specialize in all the time. They're doing molecular sequencing, they're describing new species, and they're working on physiology and life histories and so on. We have nobody like that in the whole of Australasia, which seems extraordinary for such an important group of people.
Hmm.
There will be people who are working on them from a pharmacological point of view, but very few experts. Um, I became interested in marine biology when I was at high school because our fifth form high school teacher had us all buy a 2-volume paperback set called Animals Without Backbones, first published in 1938 in the United States, and then copied in several editions afterwards. But those 2 volumes had the most amazing black and white photographs of all these invertebrate creatures. I was never that interested in vertebrates, fishes and birds and mammals and so on. But invertebrates, fascinating diversity. And today we recognize about 32 phyla, which we would call invertebrate, in other words, not chordates. And they're intensely interesting. And in New Zealand, um, we're still in the discovery phase of our marine biodiversity. We haven't yet documented all our species in the same way that has been done in Europe or North America. And the deeper we go in the sea, the more species that we find. So the job of the marine biodiversity team here at NIWA, which is now ESNZ, we've merged with Geological and Nuclear Sciences to become Earth Sciences New Zealand. So the job of the team here at what used to be called NIWA is to name and classify the non-fish marine life of New Zealand. So that includes seaweeds, and as many invertebrate groups as we have expertise for. Of course, the other thing is that in New Zealand, we're so thin on the ground with people who can name our biota. We're just basically one deep in most cases for experts. My area of interest is bryozoa, phylum bryozoa, and most people have never heard of them, but we've got over 1,100 species in our seas around New Zealand. They're highly diverse. They make up 20 to 70% of our limestones, and they're small coral-like colonial organisms, which can also foul the bottoms of boats, so they have economic application. So our marine life is highly diverse. It's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, we're very lucky, aren't we, to live in this part of the world? I feel that way anyway.
Well, we are because we're so close to the coast, and so we can not only go wandering in the bush, we can walk along a seashore and so on. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and get in the sea for some of it. And because this is a swimming podcast, I need to ask you: are you a sea swimmer at all, or have you ever been?
No, I couldn't swim to save myself.
Fair enough. Any diving?
Very little. I prefer the tropics where the water is warm, and then I enjoy snorkeling.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Dennis, and for answering all my many questions about
Oh, great questions.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us that we might not know about jellyfish or anything to do with Wellington Harbour or swimming in the sea? Or
Nothing that comes to mind, except that one thing I was reading about the other day. I learnt this from one of my colleagues. Um, uh, it's quite a sad one in some ways, and maybe it's a cultural thing, but he's noticed that hordes of people can be seen on seashores on the Hauraki Gulf, stripping every rock pool and shore surface from anything. Anemones, sea stars, goodness knows what they do with them because most of these things are inedible, but completely removing all the marine life, everything, just
Mm.
scraping down the sides of rock pools and hard surfaces. And that's going to have a major impact on marine biodiversity in the shallow water. The biggest belief why that's even happening. So I know that people and iwi, for example, are becoming quite concerned about this practice. I hope somebody gets on top of that one.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised it. Yeah, I think most people listening to this podcast want to protect our seashores and moana, but yeah, definitely need to be mindful of not exploiting what we have.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that children from future generations can enjoy what you and I have enjoyed growing up. Because we have this phenomenon called changing baselines, where if you talk to your grandparental generation, they'll say, oh, well, I used to catch fish, this big, and now they're this big, they're much shorter. This is happening all around the world. So the shifting baselines, um, we are familiar with what we see in our generation. We think, oh, that's the way it's always been. But actually, it's very much better at some point in the past, and that's why we need marine reserves.
yeah, that's a really good point. And we're so lucky to have our South Coast Marine Reserve, aren't we, here in Wellington,
Yes.
Tauranga? Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing you mentioned earlier was that you get sent photos of jellyfish to identify. Is that something that people around the world send you pictures, or is it people in New Zealand who are diving and they spot something?
No, it's just within New Zealand. Members of the public, which we welcome, I have to say, it's fantastic because members of the public will send in pictures of anything, not just jellies, but they'll find something washed up on the shore, or they'll see it in a rock pool and say, rock pool or something, and they'll say, what on earth is this? They'll send their photos in, unfortunately, often without a scale, so sometimes it's hard to know what it is we're dealing with. But we welcome people doing that, because it gives us information on new records. Sometimes the photos that the public take are really, really good. We say, can we use that? And they say, yeah, very happy for you to do that. So it's great when people do that.
What's the best way for people to do that? Is it through the Earth Sciences website, or
Yes. Well, in the past, people have just telephoned or Googled, and usually a person's name will come up. I do tend to be the go-to person, but we fortunately got a newer, younger. I'm 80 now, and I'm emeritus, but we've got a younger person here, Diana McPherson, assistant collections manager, who's also is quite knowledgeable on jellies as well. And so, but people can send anything in, and so the people who receive these messages will contact the person on campus who can best deal with it.
Okay, that's really good to know.
No charge.
No charge, important. Free service. And has anyone sent you a particularly exciting picture that you can remember that was mysterious?
Mass strandings are particularly interesting. Sometimes, for no reason that anybody knows about, you'll have a mass stranding of one particular species. It might be a particular species of offshore sea snail, like a Struthularia, ostrich foot shell, or a spoonworm, these big sausage things about 15 or so centimeters long, on Waikanae Beach, I think it was, many, many years ago. And these can happen. And so mass stranding is particularly interesting. There was there was a mass stranding. This is really good. There was a mass stranding of some fire salps, and this particular fire salp looked like a kind of a pink carrot. And they were all washed up on the seashore, and people thought they were carrots. And they sent a photograph of this. And, these were flower salps. This is really amazing. I'd never seen anything like that before.
No, I don't think I have either. So I have to look at the picture.
Yeah. So yes, often we do learn, from photos that the public sent in. That's great. Where it's problematic is something rotting. And where there might be just a bit of bone and a bit of tissue, often it's some rotting fish or something, and people think, what on earth is this? They'll send that in if we have no idea.
Right, it's too late to identify it.
It's too late.
All right, brilliant, Dennis. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thanks for calling.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Swim Chats. Please remember to follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you enjoyed it, you can leave a 5-star rating and review, which helps other people find it too. Enjoy the water, and we'll see you next time.